On 9/11/2001, I consider myself a lucky man. I had two of my children working within 2 blocks of the Twin Towers, and they all came up okay. I also never met anybody that perished on that day. But I was traumatized at the same time because I had seen the buildings come up during the 70s, and they had become a fixed point on the New York City silhouette. And wherever I went, I just raised my eyes and saw the Twin Towers. And from there, I could orient myself where I was within the city. I lost my nerves that day as I was watching TV and saw the tower coming down. I heard myself screaming, and that was such a deep, visceral scream that I could not believe it was I who was screaming. This experience will last for me for the entire life. But now that we have reached the 10th year, my question as an American citizen is why? What caused the collapse of the towers? And I have asked the retired Chief Fireman Arthur Scheuerman, who wrote a book specifically on the fire of the skyscrapers. The title is The Fire in the Skyscraper. And I would like to welcome you. Thank you for having come to our show.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I read the book, and it's very interesting, and so I thought maybe I should have an interview on this. Maybe we can show it.
This is my attempt at describing what happened.
Let's show the picture first. All right.
This little defect here, what I would call a defect or a weakness in the building, is the corner structure, as you can see here, is coming apart. And that happened all the way up to the top.
Tell me, why did you use fire in the skyscraper? Some people may not feel that the fire was the cause of the...
Well, I'm pretty sure fire was the
consequence of the fire.
Yeah, my investigation shows that.
All right, we'll go slowly one at a time. Okay. My question to you now is, it took maybe 50 minutes from the impact of the airplane to the collapse of the first building.
Right.
Why is that? To me, it implies that something was wrong as far as the structure of the building itself, and not necessarily the airplane.
Right. Steel is insulated for the purpose of slowing down the amount of heat the temperature that it's going to reach in a fire. And the reason it came down, the first tower came down in 58 minutes, is because that's how long it took to heat the steel to the point of failure.
Oh, so you simply seem to imply that because of the structure of the building, but there are many other buildings in New York that are steel structured buildings and not cement or bricks. So they're all in danger?
Some of them might be, if they have this kind of construction. This is really extreme construction. This is like lightweight. It's a huge building. I mean, the people that built this building obviously had no conception of what a fire-safe building should be.
Tell me a little about the airplane. Some people say that the jet fuel really caused the whole problem because they had large tanks of fuel oil. Was that a possibility with the high temperature? Did the building reach high temperature?
What the fuel did was ignite a lot of the combustibles on the floors where the plane went in. The planes went in on like 2 floors, and the fuel served to ignite everything because when it hit the outside wall, it just disintegrated the plane, and the fuel just sprayed in there.
I see.
So you had an instantaneous fire throughout the whole area, which is the problem. But the fuel was not the problem, as the amount of heat. The combustibles inside the building is what provided the heat.
Is this the first time that an airplane hits a skyscraper?
Well, there was a plane that hit the Empire State Building. I think it was 1945.
45.
A bomb that was lost. That was a much smaller plane, but it hit.
And nothing happened to the Empire State Building?
It hit a column directly, and it did nothing to the column. I mean, the Empire State Building is so strong that it's the plane did nothing to the structure. It ignited a fire, and the fuel went down the elevator shafts, and some people were killed, but the fire department put the fire out
immediately,
rather quickly, and nothing happened to the building. So what's the
difference between, let's say, the structure of the two buildings? The Empire State Building was hit, fuel, oil, inflamed, people killed, but the building is still there.
Yeah, right.
The Twin Towers, instead, it fell in 58 minutes or 50 minutes.
Right. The structure is completely different in a lightweight, huge.
In what sense? You said lightweight, also the steel. The steel is a culprit here? I thought steel was better than cement.
Well, it depends. In the Empire State Building, the steel was heavy, and it was connected with what they call moment connections. All strong connections, short spans. It was a grid of steel inside the building that holds the stone and the concrete and the floors and everything. So it was much stronger. It was built to a code where the columns had to last for 4 hours in a furnace test, and the beams had to last. The main beams had to last 4 hours.
You mean to say that the Twin Towers had a different code?
Yeah, in I think it was 68, they reduced the requirements for the number of hours that the building would be able to resist fire. And they did a lot of other things, because when they expanded the spans in the floors, the furnace test that we have only tests floors that are 17 feet long. So that's the standard test. When they expand out to 60 feet, which these bar joists were, there's no test on that. There's no test yet been done on that kind of a floor.
So you mean to say is that the floors on the Empire State Building were fire tested before they went up?
Exactly. They were tested at the span of 17 feet.
17 feet was the maximum then.
Right.
But with the Empire State, with the Twin Towers, the floor span went to 60 feet.
60 feet, right.
And there was no
test for it. They were using the same tests on it for a 17-foot floor. And they expanded out to 60 feet. There's a big difference, because the expansion of steel depends on the length. A 60-foot beam will expand much more than a smaller span.
Also will bend a little faster, I imagine.
The expansion will cause it to bend, and the internal forces in the trusses cause it to bend also.
I see. So, is there a sure way of saying what caused the collapse?
Yeah, they're doing computer studies on this, and they found that the spans were too long. Absolutely. And the open area, the fire department can't extinguish a fire in a huge open area like that. The most the fire department can extinguish is like 5,000 square feet with 2 lines.
So you're saying because they had expanded the floor area, squareage floor,
right.
The firemen, and it is actually open, those offices were open, wide open with all the windows,
right.
That if a fire starts in one of these floors, it's difficult to contain?
It's difficult to extinguish because of the area of fire.
But what happened on the Empire State Building, for example? Did they have these wide space
They
areas?
didn't have these wide open
Was they
spaces.
were they done on purpose? Restricted the sizes of the rooms, for example?
Yeah, in the old code, the 1938 code, they had restrictions on the area between firewalls. That's the area between firewalls is what controls how big a fire there's going to be. That's why we have fire doors. We have the floors are rated for 3 hours, and the walls are rated for 4 hours. So if all else happens, that fire is going to be contained in that small area, and it's not going to do any damage to the building, and it's not going to do any damage to people.
In fact, in the Code of 38, there was specific items. A room had to have a certain size. They need to have corridors, hallways.
Exactly.
And with the new code, there was no such thing?
They eliminated, they dropped that out, you know.
They just dropped them out like that?
There used to be a fire test also, a hose test. After this fire was burning for 4 hours, we would put a hose on the walls and on the ceiling to see what happened, to see if it would contract and collapse from the shock of the water, cooling it. And so the buildings were very much stronger than they are now.
Tell me, because we were talking, you're telling about the contraction of the walls and the floors. Up to recently, I thought a floor was simply a floor. You saw the tiles or the marble or whatever, and you walked on it. But yet there's a whole science about the floor. It's a composite of different layers of things. Can you talk to us about a little, what is the floor really?
Well,
maybe we want to show it into a picture.
Yeah,
huh?
okay.
Maybe will be the best thing. Okay, let's go back for a minute because we want to show the Twin Towers. This is one of the Twin
Right.
Towers. And what is this?
this shows you the construction of the towers. The outside walls were very strong shear walls. In other words, a shear wall has strength in this direction. All right?
Okay, no, but let's
it has
talk
very
about
little strength in this direction.
Yeah, let's talk about this picture now. If maybe we could put it back. When we talk about the long span, what are you talking about? What is the long span floors?
Okay. In this building, you see a core.
That's
this is
core
the interior core columns
of the building.
And it's rectangular shaped. So this whole building is square. So in here, there's a rectangular shape. So two sides of this building are long span.
Long span. That means they're very, from 17 feet to 60 feet. They're about 60 feet long.
60 feet long. It's a very long span for steel.
And the core is made up of what, beams?
The core is where they put all the bathrooms and the stairways and elevator shafts. Anything that would interfere with this open space here
was taken out.
They put in the core.
Now this turned out to be also a damaging situation because everything was set in the same area. The stairwell, the elevators.
Yeah, right. When the plane
air
went
shafts.
When the plane went into the North Tower, it went straight in on this long span side, and it went into the core, and it destroyed the stairwells, the elevator shafts. All the elevators got thrown into the cellar because it broke the cables.
So people could not get in.
People were cut off. The people that were above the fire were in serious trouble because the plane went in and the walls were just sheetrock or.
So the building was done at the cost was in order to increase commercial space, I imagine.
Right.
It was done at the cost of safety or at least security, strength of the building.
Yeah, all those were disregarded apparently.
Apparently
they just they went bananas.
We
on
are
this
talking about the
building,
floor, so let's talk about the floor now. The modern floor is like this, right?
This is not a modern floor. This has been banned. This type of floor has been banned in the city.
Oh yeah.
They can't use this anymore. because of this fire.
Oh, because of the fire, but this is what was there?
This is what was there, right? So you had bar joist trusses, which are steel, and they have all these, they have a bottom cord and a top cord, and all these struts in the middle holding them apart.
Yeah.
Now the bottom cord is in tension all the time, and the top cord is in compression. And they put a steel deck on top of these.
So I guess it balances up. One presses and one gives in.
Right.
Now, you presented a beautiful image of the floor. It's like a hammock, you said. When you step on it, it bends. Right. But then if you put a stick on top where the bending of the ending is prevented, so that will be the tenseness. Keeps the
tension,
yeah.
The bottom cord is in tension all the time, which is a pulling force. Like a rope would always be in tension. Because
it doesn't want to go down, so
right.
It puts it up.
And the top cord is in compression. It's being pushed together. And they put the cement on top, and they try to make it a composite, to work in unison with this concrete slab.
And in fact, you say that this is some section of the floor where there's this knuckles.
Right. These knuckles are the tops of the bent over bars of the bar joist truss, and that extends into the concrete, and it's supposed to lock the concrete to act in unison with the steel.
I see.
But what happened with this long span, as the steel expands, these knuckles break the concrete, and they disconnect from the concrete. So the floor now doesn't have that strength and compression, and it starts to sag. Mm-hmm. And also the pressure on the walls as the floor expands put compression in the floor, and it starts to sag.
Okay. And let's see, when these compression happen, or the expansion of the heat of the metal, what causes to the floor? This is the second picture here. You show that the way the floor actually bends and pulls in rather than go out, right?
This is a picture of a buckling floor from expansion and from the various forces in the steel that buckle these struts. If you have a shear force of once the top is moving one way or expanding another way, it buckles these struts in compression.
Now the struts underneath and all the material that were fireproof, you say that actually they were not strong enough. They seem to be.
Well, the fireproofing on Tower 2 was much less than the fireproofing on Tower 1. That's why the difference in the times of collapse. Even though Tower 1 got hit first, it collapsed second. But what happens with these trusses is when they buckle, they put tension on the connections, which is pulling on the columns.
Okay, maybe this one shows a little of what you mean by these floors are falling because of the heated or expanded steel rods in the pavement, in the floors, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, this is a very interesting. This is a computer-generated picture and graph down here that shows the forces. The fire is on two floors, 94 and 95, and it's heating these trusses. But
so they are bending.
This truss here is being heated from the top and the bottom, and this truss here is being heated just from the bottom because the fire is on this floor here. But it's very interesting. What's happening to this truss is very different from what's happening to this truss. Now, the average engineer says, well, they're being heated and they're softening, so they're sagging, and we know all about that. But they don't know about that because this computer-generated graph is showing that this truss, because the bottom cord is expanding more than the top chord. It's like a bow, when you're pulling back a bow.
It creates a tension.
It's creating a tension within the truss itself, which is pulling in on the column here. This is the outside column.
So
the column is holding up all the floors in the building.
Yeah.
All right? So it's pulling in on this column. If this column buckles, it's not going to be able to handle any load in the building. It can't even hold its own load. It would just collapse. So this floor is pulling in on the columns. This floor that's being heated from both sides is not in bowing mode. It's in expansion mode.
So
it's expanding.
So it's pushing the wall
It's
out.
pushing the wall out. So these two things are operating very differently on the wall. This one is pulling the wall in, and this one is pushing the wall out. Now what happens to this when it gets in enough compression from expanding that it buckles? Now this steel is not heated to the point where it's getting weaker. It still has its full strength, which is what the engineers don't understand. They think the steel is weakening. That's why it's not weakening. The steel is buckling here because it's expanding more than it has room to expand.
It has to go somewhere.
Right. So now this floor you can even see is buckling upward because it's just being heated on the top.
Now, you say in the book that there was some sound like boom, 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 a sequence of sound. And to your idea is that actually these floors eventually gave in and broke.
Well, some of them disconnected from the columns, and that would make, I imagine, a loud sound. Just the bolts breaking would make a loud sound, like a boom, boom, boom.
And some of the bolts were not even there, if I read it correctly. There were supposed to be 3 or 4 buckles there. Sometimes
the columns were spliced. In other words, the columns are connected together by bolts, 4 bolts, and they even left some of the bolts out. So this is how fast they were trying to build this building fast, you know. And the faster they build it, the more money they make.
Of course. Now, I read that actually if 3 floors gave in, then the whole building would come down, and that's what happened. Is that a plausible theory that 3 floors would...
I've been in contact with engineers all over the world, and one of the best is Arthur Scheuerman from the UK. And he discovered from his tests that if 2 floors buckle this way and act as bowing, start bowing, they can pull the columns in where the columns eventually fail. So that's what happened. It started in Tower 2, where it pulled in the east wall, the whole east wall, which is a huge amount of columns. I think it's 29 columns at once. And
also give in.
The weakness in the corners were partly responsible for that. This shows where the corners were just to enclose the building. Normally,
so they just opened up.
Yeah, normally in a building, the corners are very tightly connected because that gives strength to the building. Well, in this situation, they weren't tightly connected. The only thing holding the walls was the floors.
But